Good afternoon. Welcome to today's grad talk. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Darren Lipomi. I'm a professor in nanoengineering and chemical engineering and material science, and I'm also the faculty director of the IDEA Student Center and soon to be the Associate Dean for Students in Engineering starting on July 1st. So I'm going to talk today about continuing on in academia, and really two components to continuing on in academia. That is finding and funding a postdoc and finding a faculty position. And it's geared toward R1 faculty positions, but I do have some information in here too about other types of faculty positions. So I think if you're here, you at least have some interest in pursuing a postdoc and possibly a position in academia, although you may be, maybe you're at this seminar because you are weighing whether or not to pursue those things. And I think it's fair to say that many PIs want their students to continue on in this route because, number one, it justifies their own life choices to convince other people to do it, and also because they like the idea of having people in the lab who are, as committed to creating knowledge in an academic environment as they are. I think it's a great job for a lot of people. I consider myself extremely lucky to have this position. I love my job. I love interacting with students. I love research. I love creating knowledge. I love working with people who share that same interest in using the curation and generation and dissemination of knowledge as their reason to be, right? It is great for a lot of reasons. It is also maybe not the best thing for many other reasons. And there might be some reasons why you may not want to continue in academia. The funding landscape is really competitive. Most grant applications are rejected on a basis of 80 to 90%. You tend to teach the same topics every year, and this can be a source of diminishing amount of time that you have to spend teaching that course. But trust me, it will get boring to teach the same topics every year. In academia, if you are a professor at an R1 institution, that is say the top 100 or so universities that have a high research productivity, the pay is low relative to other jobs that you might have with an advanced degree. And what are those jobs? So industrial R&D, business. Should be a comma after business, or I guess it could be business law. Business, so that is people who have a PhD but go on into the business aspect of perhaps a technical company. You might be in upstream marketing or business development in a big company, and those roles tend to pay better than academic positions. Law, particularly patent law. If you think about types of law that require a PhD. Medicine, I was horrified and proud to learn that I had a former mentee who was basically, I was an undergraduate TA for a lab course, and he was a year and a half younger than me as a sophomore in organic chemistry lab, and we would kind of goof around and whatever. It was like the late night lab session from 6 to 10 p.m. or something, and then he was a biomedical engineering student, undergraduate student. Went to med school, residency, did a post-residency research fellowship in a biomedical engineering lab, then did a post-specialization, and is now making $480,000 a year as a cardiologist in a teaching hospital. And so there are other places that advanced degrees might have a more lucrative career. Consulting is another place that PhDs go. So if you look at the top tier places like the big three, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, the entering PhD salaries there are quite a lot higher. And the people in my class of grad school who are still in those jobs make $1 million a year, for better or worse. So chances are, if you're in this room, this is not going to dissuade you, but it might. You review a lot of papers, so I might review 40 papers a year, sometimes more, and you're on lots of committees. So these are exam committees, there are campus-level committees, there are division or school-wide committees, there are department committees, and there are kind of these ad hoc types of committees that only meet a few times per year, but they're kind of in clustered times. Yesterday, I had 11 meetings on my Google Calendar. That's not a typical day. That was probably the most scheduled day I've ever had in my career, but you do get invited to a lot of committees. There's dealing with near constant rejection. So of grants, papers, PhD applicants. So we often get rejected from the top down, so from the funding agencies down or from the journal editors down. But then sometimes when we reach out to postdoc and PhD applicants, and then they reject us too. So when you're in a moment in your career where you are applying to grad school or applying to postdoc or applying to faculty position, and you're lucky enough to get more than one offer, it might be the last time in your career you have the opportunity to reject up. So enjoy it. Just kidding. It never feels good to be on either side of a rejection. In summary, there are a few other career choices that have as large a constituency of individuals and groups that can make legitimate demands on your time. That is, students, chairs, editors, program managers, journalists sometimes. Although if you are contacted by a journalist, it's probably because you did something good. In a very rare case, it could be because you did something bad. All that said, I love my job and I can't imagine doing anything else. But in order to do this job, depending on what field you're in, you need to do a postdoc. Not in every field, and I'll get to that in a moment, but in most fields. A postdoc. So my parents were not scientists. My dad was a tailor, and my mom was a librarian, and they didn't know anything about this ecosystem of academic professionals as they move up the ranks. And the way I described a postdoc to them was like an academic residency. So MDs that want to practice have to do a residency in internal medicine, cardiology, psychiatry, whatever. A postdoc, a PhD who wants to be a professor has to do a postdoc usually. It used to be like an honor. Like a postdoc used to be something that very few people actually did. We're talking about 50s and 60s, where a postdoc was like an award, where you get to spend somebody else's money for a few years and work on whatever you want under the guidance of that person. Now it's more like a necessity. It's kind of like an arms race because everybody kind of has to do a postdoc, so more and more people are doing postdocs. It is still, however, the last period in which you can work on what you want to work on with your PI without having to be on the hook for getting every dollar for that position, which is still a nice position to be in. Postdocs are getting longer, so we talked about like the concept of like arms race. You're competing with all of these other people. If they have a 3-year postdoc, then maybe you need to do a 3-year postdoc. Or if it's a 4-year postdoc, if everyone else in the pool has a 4-year postdoc, maybe you need to do a 4-year postdoc. Postdocs also, the length of a postdoc is different depending on the field. So biology and physics have long postdocs, so natural sciences tend to have longer postdocs than engineering. Those tend to be longer than the chemistry postdoc, which tend to be longer than the chemical and bioengineering type postdocs. These are very rough ordering. Maybe more so than materials, more so than mechie and civil and structural engineering, and more so than EE and CSE. In computer science and electrical engineering, a postdoc is kind of like a bonus, but it's totally possible to get a faculty position at an R1 without doing a postdoc. And you can see some trends here, that the farther on the left the list, the longer the postdocs are, the more like fundamental these fields tend to be, and the less employable by industry straight out of graduate school they are. And I'm solidly like in this region, so just so you know where my biases are. There's also this issue of market forces. So this goes back to the idea of like arms races. Electrical engineers and computer engineers, computer scientists tend to be employable right off the bat. A lot of undergraduate biology majors are no longer working in biology. I like the original intention of a postdoc. So postdocs in my own research group, we try to have it be more like this and less like this. So we try to find a project that is not necessarily something that like, oh, I thought of this idea and now go work on it. We try to work together, and Allison could tell you if we're successful in that model. Choosing a postdoc lab. Think about what you want to do, what interests you. Critically, what fills holes in your PhD? When you're in your PhD program and you're doing your PhD research, there might be some area that you feel deficient in and you want to flesh that out. Or maybe it's because you know what you want to do as a PI, and you know that you can differentiate yourself if you have a PhD in one area, a postdoc in kind of an orthogonal area, and then your work is going to be at that intersection. And at that intersection, you're much less likely to have to compete with other people because no one else is doing something that is quite at that intersection. It's like taking fractions, like you're the top 10% of like people who know something about chemical engineering, and you're the top 10% of someone that knows something about computer science, and all of a sudden you're 1/10 times 1/10, you're now the top 1% of the people that know how to do both. There's a question of, should I stay in my current institution or lab, or should I go somewhere else? And that's a very personal decision. Generally, the advice is to go somewhere else, because you're a lot more likely to be able to find these intersectional areas that are have different fundamental areas that combine to give you this uniqueness at the interface. Should I go to another institution? So staying at the same institution but joining a different lab and a different department is maybe most of the way toward a differentiation, but I would only really stay at the same institution if you had a really compelling reason to do so. That could be a family reason. That could be something like you're working with a collaborator and you're going to make a lateral move to that collaborator's lab. There have been many successful professors who have done that. If you don't move institutions, you might miss a chance to get a letter from a new person. So the quality of your letters ultimately are going to affect the quality of your total application package for a PI position. And if you have a strong letter from your PhD and maybe and a couple people on your committee, maybe that won't be as good as a strong letter from your PhD advisor and a strong letter from a postdoc advisor who's a new person at a new institution. There's also the issue of upgrading the last institution on your PhD or on your CV. Now, to explain what this means, nobody ever asks you what was your GPA in high school after you get to a certain point. And if you went to a less famous place and you go to a slightly more famous place, then you are automatically from that new place and for some or from that new PI's lab or something, because there are destination labs at certain institutions. The two-body problem refers to having a partner in a partner or family usually a partner that needs to move with you, and that's especially difficult at this stage, especially given the idiosyncrasies of what types of the postdoc positions that tend to be available. So I was trying to move with my wife, who was a virologist, molecular biologist, and when we knew, because we liked watching Sonoma Style on the Food Network, that we wanted to move to the Bay Area, nothing to do with science. And the Michael Chiarello show, he doesn't really exist anymore on the Food Network. But anyway, so we knew we wanted to be in California. We wanted to be in the Bay Area. I was very lucky and got into a lab at Stanford when my PhD or when my postdoc boss gave a talk at in my department as a PhD student. I wiggled my way onto her schedule and I got into her lab because I got a coveted one-on-one meeting with her. But it wasn't hard to get. I just asked the seminar organizer for that spot and I got it. So anyway, I'll talk more about that in a moment. But then my wife had to apply for 3 positions, didn't get the first 2, and finally got the third one. It might have been 4 positions. And it's not because she wasn't qualified. It's because there just aren't that many positions available in a certain city, in a lab that you want to continue doing work in. And for better or worse, that decision altered her career trajectory. And it happens that she's not in academia, but she has a really fulfilling career that is, I think, better for her than it would be if she continued in academia. For the record, she's site director at a biotech incubator site in San Diego. So things worked out. All right. Strictly speaking, the potential employer, is not allowed to ask about your partnership movements, and you would have to be the one to bring it up because they're not allowed to ask by law. Financing your postdoc. So the next two slides are about how to pay for the postdoc. In the US, so for US citizens and permanent residents, you have access to the NIH T32. This is the typical biomedical sciences, biomedical engineering type of postdoc fellowship. You can apply for it while you're still a PhD student, but you need buy-in from your postdoc mentor at the new institution. You probably also need buy-in from your current PI at your PhD institution because it takes a lot of time to apply for this. PIs often have access to supplemental funding through their NIH grants, and these supplements are heavily underutilized. So if your PI has an R01 or even an R21 grant, that is the big grant and the littler grant made by NIH, you can usually apply or often apply for a supplement that will cover up to the cost of a postdoc or a grad student. There is also the NIH Diversity Fellowship, which applies to any of the grant mechanisms, and that is a supplement that is used to support women and URM students and individuals who have shown a commitment to expanding access to biomedical STEM education and training. These types of supplements are almost like half of a grant proposal. So the funding rate tends to be very high compared to a fresh application, but they require a new set of supplemental specific aims, and it can't just be, we want more money for this project, give it to us. There has to be a reason. There has to be a scientific justification for why expanding the scope of the project is appropriate. I totally did not do that. All right. There are some institutions and institutional systems that have their own types of postdoc fellowships. A famous example is University of California, President's Postdoc Fellowship. The UC campuses often have their own local Chancellor's Postdoc Fellowship. The nice thing about either of these mechanisms is that if you get them, it automatically shortlists you for an academic position in the UC system. And some institutions outside of the UC system have special teaching and research type postdocs. So where I went to undergraduate, Boston University, we had a really great team of teaching postdocs. They did teaching and research, and I learned a ton from them, and they were probably as good of instructors as some of my regular instructors, and they applied for this position, and they got the position and funding at the same time. So there was never any worry about, is my PI going to pay me? It was automatic through this position. So you can look for those. And also, these are not limited to, actually none of these are limited to, I'd have to check on that. This for sure can be anyone, not necessarily U.S. citizen or California state residents. Actually, these can be, I'll get back to you on that. So other U.S. agencies, so National Science Foundation has, the NSF was late to the postdoc fellowship game, but they now, several programs and directorates do offer postdoc fellowships. The intelligence community, this is a kind of under the radar postdoc fellowship. It was the postdoc fellowship that I had. And there are some restrictions, like have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. But if you are, that can be a good route. Now, not every faculty member knows about all of these different mechanisms. So you should research them ahead of time before you apply to that lab, because the PI you work for might not know about these opportunities. just copied that slide. Okay. There are other U.S. agencies. Said that already. When you email a prospective PI, don't ask for I would like a funded postdoc position without offering to apply for funding along with the application. It will show that you did your research on how to finance the postdoc, and it's a lot less, comes off as a lot less demanding. There are positions with funding included, like national lab postdocs. They also tend to pay a lot better than the NIH pay scale. So the NIH pay scale is basically what an institution pays, even if you're not a biomedical researcher. The level set by the F-32 mechanism is the level that most institutions will pay their postdocs at. There are also industrial postdocs. So postdoc positions in companies that do a lot of R&D might have these available, and you search for them the same way that you would search for any other job. One underutilized, so in addition to Indeed and Monster and Glassdoor and department websites, one good search tool is Twitter search. Basically every academic postdoc position is going to be posted on Twitter, but you have to use the search function because we, as an academic community, we tend to really amplify these positions when they become available. Okay, how about finding a postdoc position? Work your advisors network and your committee members network. And I would say that the committee members network is an underutilized resource. Obviously, your advisor knows a lot of people, but your committee members know just as many potential postdoc advisors. So work the networks of friends who may be members of labs that you are interested in. Ask to meet with seminar speakers. This is really key, especially like if there's somebody who's giving a talk and you know their work from the literature, don't just, when the seminar is over, don't just turn around and leave and never see them again. Because you can totally request a one-on-one meeting. You may not get it, but probably you will because your department wants to help you. And this is how I got my postdoc. So unlike applying for a PhD position, when you apply for a postdoc, the postdoc advisor might have some expectations that you would have some specific skill set, but maybe not. Maybe they're just looking for somebody who wants to do something new, and there's evidence that they have a growth or expansive mindset and a lot of curiosity. But if it looks like the prospective PI really just wants you to do one thing, like over and over again, like, hey, I have this one idea, this is your project, I want you to work on it. Just turn the crank. Like, you should avoid that type of arrangement. You should come in with your own ideas, but be flexible. And the best conversations that I have with postdoc applicants are when we bounce ideas off of each other and then home in on the project after a few conversations or several conversations that where my contribution and their contribution is greater than either one of us, could have come up with on our own. The absolute best outcome during a postdoc is if the work of the postdoc becomes more associated with the postdoc than it does with the PI. That's like the absolute best outcome. All right, making the final decision and applying. So should you apply to more than one postdoc? Yes. Try to meet with lab. Voice-to-text catastrophe there. Try to meet with lab members. Don't agree to go somewhere you haven't visited. Go someplace where the people are healthy. curious and excited about what they're doing, and healthy. It is totally possible to go to a lab where the people are ground to dust and they're in there for 14 hours a day, and they have to keep the jacket on the back of the chair even when they're at home sleeping, so it still looks to the PI like they're there. Stay away. Those are all red flags. You want to go to a place that values openness and trust, a place that values diversity, broadly interpreted, so diversity of scientific background, of personality background, of background of origin, scientific skills, diversity of scientific skills. And the other postdocs in the group and the other graduate students too will be your teachers. Okay, is there such thing as I would argue that there's almost no such thing as rejection in applying for a postdoc position. The reason why postdoc emails go unanswered is because there just isn't a postdoc position available in that lab. It's not like, usually, it's like when I don't look, I find. There is rarely a time when I have a postdoc position available, come send me applicants and I will review them. More often than not, it's a great postdoc candidate applies to my group, and I will try to manufacture a position by moving money around or applying to some new grant or reimagining maybe a collaboration with somebody. But there's very rarely just a position available. And if there isn't and the PI has their labs full, all their funding is occupied, then they might not respond to the email, and it sucks, but that's not really a rejection. For the record, I do respond to every serious request. What do I mean by serious? The email has something to do with my research, like they mention my research. If they don't mention what I do or only mention what I can do for them rather than why the candidate is curious or interested in the topic, then I delete it. But if you get the position, you are in a position to apply for faculty positions once you complete, the postdoc. But we're not going to talk about how to complete a postdoc, only how to get it. So we'll skip the next 2 to 4 years. All right. So my own path to applying for a faculty position, I started really early. So I applied in the fall of 2011, but I wrote my first proposals in the winter of 2011. Or rather, the winter spans 2 years. So like January, February of 2011. I had these proposals finished in May. I applied to a throwaway position, a position that I knew I had no chance of getting, and I didn't even really want it. And I didn't get an interview or anything, but at least it forced me to write everything down. So if you write down some proposal ideas, the only thing that can happen is that they can get better as you go. So fail fast and fail cheap. That's the Silicon Valley way, right? In August, postings started to appear. I found a lot of jobs on Indeed.com. I'm a chemist, chemical engineer, so acs.org was useful. Professional society publications, individual departmental or university HR websites, so careers. However, I didn't find this job there. I found an unrelated position on Indeed for a senior position for advanced energy technologies in the Department of Nanoengineering. And when I reached out to the chair and I said, would you consider junior applicants? And the chair at the time said, no, but there's another position that would not have come up in any of my search terms. That was a pan-engineering position for assistant professors in advanced energy technologies. And that is the position that I applied for and got, even though it did not come up on any of my searches. Okay, so December through February, you get invitations to, so September through December are usually the deadlines for applying. December through February are the invitations. December through March are the interviews. And March through May are the decisions. And don't take rejections personally. It really comes down to basically everyone who gets an interview could do the job. But there are some very idiosyncratic reasons for why people are regarded to fit better in some institution. There might be some research strategy of the division or the department that your work doesn't necessarily fit into. So there are a lot of reasons to why you shouldn't take these rejections personally. And then June, you might get the final contract, and your position might start in July or August. What are parts of the application? The cover letter, the CV, the research statement, which are generally 3 proposals. A good number is 7 pages, 1 kind of overview page, and then 2 pages per proposal. A teaching statement. I say teaching statement as opposed to like teaching philosophy, because you can write about your teaching philosophy, but when the rubber meets the road and you're standing there in front of this room full of senior faculty and you say, well, my philosophy is there, they might not laugh at you, but you're right to perceive that they're laughing at you because they have been teaching for a long time. And it's a little bit arrogant, I think, to use the word philosophy. But anyway, that's just me. Okay, diversity statement is an important part of the application in the UC system and in some other institutions as well. The letters of recommendation, you usually need 3 of those: your postdoc advisor, your PhD advisor, and maybe a senior collaborator. This was my cover letter. I shudder when I read it now for certain reasons. I guess it did the job.
What about it makes you shudder?
Just the fact that I didn't know what I was getting into and didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, I kind of did. I knew what the words were, but I didn't know what the words meant. I intend to maintain a productive and innovative research group and will vigorously pursue external funding. Yeah, I would not be caught dead writing those words again. This was my CV, pretty normal. I think I use exactly the same template now. 10 years later, I haven't changed it at all. This was my research proposal number 1. I don't have any of the others on here. This was the overview slide, or the overview page, and the last page of the research proposals. This is my teaching statement. I wanted to, this actually I'm a little bit more proud of than the cover letter, because I even used the word synchrony in here and like flipped classroom, and these are things that I really did try to do as I progressed through this position. So what was the percent recovery and percent yield? I had 23 applications, 7 interviews, and 1 offer. And you're looking at that offer right now. I am here. So the fact that we were a dual career couple influenced where to apply. When I suggested that we apply to some cold places, my wife said, "Over my dead body." Such as it is. Not that I'm complaining about being in the America's finest city of San Diego, California. I applied in chemistry and engineering departments. So my original training was in chemistry, my postdoc was in a Chem-E department, and I kind of fit both, partially in both molds. In chemistry, I only had 1 out of 13. I applied in some specific subfields, like there was like a position in physical chemistry and like inorganic chemistry, and I totally did not have a chance there, but they were in departments where I thought my PhD advisor thought that I thought that he would have thought that if you don't apply there, you're not a serious candidate. So I applied there even though I knew I did not fit, but it was a total waste of time on my part to do that. 0 offers of 1 interview in chemistry. In chemical engineering, I got 4 interviews out of the 6 places that I applied. No offers out of 4 interviews in chemical engineering. And if you take MSc and nanoengineering departments, I applied to 4. I got 2 interviews, and that one was that one was UCSD. Although if I had 7 offers, I want to go on the record that I still would have come here. Natural scientists, I think everyone here is an engineer, but if you're a natural scientist, get your stuff called engineering, because things will go a lot smoother for you. And also, once you're in an engineering department, you can do all the basic science you want. But if you're in a natural sciences department and you try to do engineering or anything overly applied, you'll have a much harder time getting stuff through the promotion and tenure system. Did you have a question?
Yeah, what do you mean by subfield searches?
A subfield search is something that is overly specific. So instead of a general call for applications in a particular area, it was like, we are looking for a nanoengineer who does lipid nanoparticle formulation for SARS coronavirus 2. And it wouldn't be that specific, but something that is clearly not what I was. And I applied for some of those anyway because of where they were located. You should by all means apply to adjacent fields as well. So if you're a biomedical engineer, but there's a biomaterials position open, or a biorobotics position open in a mech-y department, totally free to apply to those. They will not look at, they generally will not look at your the degree it says on your diploma and reject or accept you on exactly that basis. Chemical engineering is a little bit different. Chemical engineers tend to want to see that you've taught in those areas, because heat and mass transport and kinetics, there can be some similarities to mech-y, some similarities to chemistry, but they tend to be a little bit more strict. All right, so what are their favorite things to look for in a job applicant? So getting an interview, publications. So my PhD advisor, for better or worse, said, not everyone can read, but everyone can count. Proposals. Your research proposals should be solid. They should be not just the extension of what you've done as a student or a postdoc, but have some kind of pie in the sky aspect. Your letters as well. So getting an offer, what do they look for when they decide to give you an offer? The first is fit. The second is also fit. a third fit. And then number 4 is the proposals. So the proposals, you want to tailor them to the core of the department. So you want to aim high, aim for something that would have a really awesome outcome if it would work, but you want to be prepared to back it up. But I would have, if I had to do this over again, I would err on the side of impact and broad reach as opposed to safeness, like something that I knew I could do if I had enough time, or if I had the position. So develop effective arguments for your research, subject them to pressure in conversations with your lab mates, with your PI, with your committee members, and they're going to try to poke holes, and the more you argue about the merits of your ideas, the more you will refine your arguments, the more you will do outside research to reinforce your arguments. I got the advice one time that in an interview you don't want to get intellectual, which is odd because you're applying for a university professor position. And I think what my senior colleague meant by "don't get intellectual" is stick to the script of your expertise and don't get philosophical, like teaching philosophy, research philosophy, because as a 29 to 35-year-old faculty candidate, and you're talking to somebody who's been in the job for 30 years, they may smile and nod, but they're really thinking, this person doesn't have a clue. Okay, maybe not always, but don't get intellectual. All right. Also remember, you wouldn't want to be at a place that wouldn't have you as a member. So if they don't want you, you probably don't want them either. This was my interview itinerary for my longest interview. I met with this was not in one interview, but overall in my my couple of month journey as a faculty candidate, I met with 100 faculty for 30 minutes over 7 interviews. What I did was I memorized one technical and non-technical question or fact for everyone that I was going to meet. So like in the hotel the day before, I would go through their faculty pages, take notes on my meetings, and one time, or take notes on each one of the people in my itinerary. And one time I was in somebody's office and they're like, "Where are you going next?" And they grabbed the sheet from me and it had all my notes on everybody on it. They didn't say anything. You have to ask for bathroom breaks because they will not be scheduled into your schedule. There will not be a break in there. Yeah, so they will tell you, they might be interviewing 8 people for this position. And if they give someone an offer, even though they're probably only going to make one offer, and if they make somebody an offer, they want that person to accept. So don't believe any of the flattery because they're telling it to everyone. These are things that I heard from places that rejected me. "You are our top candidate. Your application floated right to the top." The chair said, "The chair makes the final decision here. What do I have to tell you to make you decide to come here instead of the other place that he knew I was interviewing? I'm pushing hard for you. You're number 1 with me and number 1 or 2 with every other member of the faculty." The dean, "We would love to have you here at such and such." And then my favorite, "I'm not a superstar, you're a superstar." And when your interview is over, send the administrators thank you notes. So usually it's not the faculty putting together your schedule and getting all these cats herded and getting faculty on your itinerary. Usually it is somebody in the department office. Send notes to faculty afterwards as well. "Thanks for taking the time to meet with me. I enjoyed hearing your thoughts on such and such. send your letter writers a gift. You don't have to do that, but it's nice of you. And academic science and engineering is a small world. Even those places that, so I have a very unevolved sense of satisfaction when I get an invitation to speak at a place that at one point rejected me for something. They are not out to destroy your career. They still want to work with you, even the places where you do not get an offer. And it is actually a great experience to see all of this science in a short period of time. And my PhD advisor told me after I got 6 rejections in a row before I finally got an offer from UCSD, if you have to apply again next year, it's nothing over the course of a career, and your arguments for the interview will be stronger. Here's what I learned from the other side of the faculty search committee. The whole package is hard to find, so that is somebody who is a great teacher, a great researcher, going to be a great fundraiser, great with students, fits the research strategy of the lab or of the department. It's a lot like if you rent an apartment or buy a house, you're never going to find that place that has the pool, it's close to public transit, it's close to a grocery store, it's walkable, it's drivable, there's bike parking. You're never going to find all of those things. And as a faculty search committee member, you are never going to find somebody that meets 100% of all of your different expectations, but you can still get somebody who is amazing. Research proposals are generally too safe. My research proposals were too safe. So by not too safe, I don't mean unsafe. I mean pie in the sky. You want to shoot, you want to aim big. So feedback I got, at least one proposal has to be a moonshot. Also, when answering questions, I got defensive and didn't keep up my energy. So that's something that I learned, is that when I gave a talk in my normal stage presence, role, and then people ask questions and I answered them like this. So keep up the energy, and faculty candidates should keep up the energy during their Q&A. I rarely find evidence of data-driven teaching methods in the teaching statements. So this is a real way to differentiate yourself. Funding strategies are not appropriately targeted, so it's worth going through, talking to your advisor about what types of proposals go to NSF, DOE, different NSF programs, NIH. Multi-stage interviews are better, in my opinion. So you take a list of 10, then you interview them on Zoom or the phone, and you shortlist them to 5. We tend to get better candidates that way. From the standpoint of the applicant, find a way, and I don't mean this in a cynical kind of capitalist way, but turn yourself into a product, really selling what your research is, your creativity, your teaching, what you're going to bring to the university, and figure out what makes your application package different from everybody else's. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Yep. I think there is a huge advantage to people who have been in industry and come back to academia. Those people make great colleagues and great professors. Probably some of the best faculty members that you have are those that spent time in industry. From a faculty search perspective, though, it's difficult to find a candidate who worked in industry for a while who continued to publish, because there needs to be evidence that they are at the cutting edge of the the exploratory and academic work, the fundamental science. And there are industrial positions that do offer that ability. And if you think that you want to go back into academia after taking an industrial job, make sure to keep those options open by continuing to do research, trying to publish where applicable. You'd think that patents are equivalent to publications, but they're really not. Stay engaged in the scientific community, go to conferences, do conference talks. There are more and less good ways of staying engaged if that is your plan. So industrial and national lab postdoc positions. Most faculty members I know that did one of the two of those were national lab postdocs, and those are roughly equivalent to a university postdoc. They do pay a lot better in general when you're there. But the PIs are very well known in academia, so you'll go to a conference and you'll see people from NREL and from NIST and from the Air Force Research Lab and so forth. Industrial postdocs tend to be for people who want to stay at in the leading edge of like industrial R&D after that postdoc position is completed, but not always, and every field is a little bit different. But I would say that if there was a difference, that would be the difference. There are many outstanding faculty members who applied or who got rejected everywhere. I use the word reject loosely. The first time they applied. It is not necessary to do a second postdoc because you got rejected. Sometimes it's a bad year. Like the 2021 application cycle was a horrible year because of COVID. And a lot of good people got rejected for that, like during that time. If you do a second postdoc, it shouldn't be because you got rejected. It's because there's another area that you really want to add to your toolkit as a researcher. It is totally an acceptable thing to do. In the grand scheme of things, taking another 2+ years to learn a completely new skill set, depending on your personal circumstances, is okay. But I wouldn't do it because of the rejections, because those could be for any reason. Maybe staying at your current postdoc another year will get you a number of new publications that you can use to apply the next time. By the skin of my teeth, I got this job on the first round. But like I said, I had 6 rejections in a row, and I was quite sure it was not going to work out. But then I got an email from the chair at UCSD, and it did. All right, thanks a lot for your attention.